I'm Stephanie Wilson, and you're listening to Freedom Over Fascism. Hi, friends. This past week, I talked to Aviv Russ, a storyteller and strategist who makes mobilization and persuasion ads for our friends at Way to Win and ASO Communications, aka using the race, class, gender narrative in partnership with Anat Shenker-Osorio and all the good people who work with her. Our conversation is a little different than just talking about strategy and narrative. We dive deeper into the kind of imagination we need to have to build our future and how joy itself can be resistance. When Aviv and I first talked, we had so much to say about the present moment that it was challenging to narrow it down into a single podcast episode. He's truly a visionary and a deep thinker, and if you haven't, you should subscribe to his Substack at groundworkagency.substack.com. He gets to the very heart of our present moment in a several-part series on the political system that was never built to hold us, and what it will take to imagine and create the future without settling for less. As you know, events on the ground are coming fast and furious, and I'll let you get your minute-by-minute update on other great Substacks and podcasts. Here, we'll continue to talk about widening the aperture of what constitutes politics, how we become thoughtful about reaching voters who don't see themselves in the system, and how we talk more about our values and less about politics in places where non-political people take in the world. If you can, please sign up for a free subscription to Freedom Over Fascism at www.freedomoverfascism.us. I know Substack is getting crowded with a lot of new and very famous faces, and everyone's asking for a subscription, which, fair. We all want to be paid for our work. What we need to do is find a way for the big-name folks to collaborate with smaller-name folks like me so the whole system can rise. So, my ask for today, please pass this podcast on to at least one friend or family member who's new. My content is totally free, and it's different than the news of the moment-based shows that proliferate Substack. Thank you, and please enjoy my conversation with Aviv Russ at the Groundwork Agency. Aviv Russ, welcome to Freedom Over Fascism.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's so nice to talk to you here.
You describe yourself as having a career at the intersection of narrative and strategy, but also mobilizing, shifting culture. We've talked a lot about imagination and joy. And I wanted to talk to you about how do we widen the aperture of how we view the world, given where we are. We're in between what was not working very well, what is also not working very well, and what could be, which requires a lot more imagination than we've been showing. And we're also in a space where just paying attention to the world can be really disheartening. So how do we pay attention to the world and still pay attention to making joy, creating whatever it is that we create? I saw somebody this morning on Substack who said, you've got to keep one eye on the world and one eye on your internal world. And I thought that was a
Totally.
very interesting way of thinking about it. He was an artist. So what are your thoughts in terms of, that's a lot I just threw at you, but yeah,
Let's go. Let's take it apart, though. I think it's great. We're at the end of the post-World War II era. That framework for how stability exists is disappearing. So the people in our lives that grew up telling us this is the world order, this is what you can expect, it's all being torn down. And what we have to be able to look at is say, okay, that instability is there. There's always been chaos in our world. The Cold War was incredibly insane. You have to go under to save yourself from a nuclear disaster.
Right.
The AIDS epidemic in the 80s was an unbelievable catastrophe, and you could feel like the world was ending. These problems in our society, the chaos in our society always has existed. And if you look back at how people have managed to deal with it, it is by confronting that which is unacceptable. I think this is Churchill. Change that which you cannot accept and accept that which you cannot change.
Right.
And internally, what we do is we have to find space for ourselves to appreciate and have joy. That is where our creativity is going to come from. If we approach our future with this sense of sorrow, we're going to have a negative outcome. We're going to feel we're not going to bring our best to the table.
So I've been wrestling with this, and I know you have too, is bringing is imagining that future that we want to have, which is all of us living our best lives, being our best selves, being able to have the things that make life better. And there's lots of ways to interpret that. So looking at that and not getting subsumed by the anger or subsumed by the sorrow, I think is a really important thing. And also, what does that world look like? And how are we going to achieve it? As opposed to the little things like, oh, how are we going to block this piece of legislation? Or how are we going to stop these deportation flights? Those are big, but they're not the
Yeah,
whole picture.
sure. No, there's the real world out here that we are going to have to deal with, that we're going to see on the news, that we're going to experience, that's going to affect us and people we love. And there's the part of the world that we can control where we take it upon ourselves to say, no, I have whatever it might be. I'll use myself for example. I have a beautiful daughter and a wonderful wife, and we have a home, and I'm grateful and I'm appreciative. And we're a Jewish family. We celebrate Shabbat. It's a nice moment every week where we get to kind of close off and have some joy for ourselves. We make time for ourselves to be happy. And I acknowledge that in joy, there is an active resistance. Oppressive regimes like this one operate under the ability to suppress people's love and joy and excitement about the world so that they stop caring. We don't exist on this planet just to make things, to sell and buy. We exist to experience and feel. So our ability to appreciate joy and bring it to a forefront in our lives is in itself an act of resistance. It tells our oppressors, it tells our leadership that we are not here to suffer.
Good.
And you can't take that away from us. That's real power. No one can make you feel anything. You control how it is that you feel. That's one-on-one situation when someone tries to make you angry. You can take it down upon yourself. So we're talking about creativity and how artists and how storytellers can help ingest that. I think that's a part of what we have to inspire, because if we bring to the table sorrow and despair and fear about our future, who's going to want to join that movement? Who's going to want to be a part of that action? The future that we're talking about is full of life, it's full of joy, it's full of health and safety and wellness and community. And we're going to build it in small ways, and we're going to grow it out.
Right. I have a kid too, although mine is junior in high school.
Yeah.
And he really kind of wants to block out as much of this situation that we're in as possible because he is going to be living in it, immersed in it. It's his future, like your daughter's future, that they're going to have to live in. So thinking about how can we make it possible for them to still have childhood when the world they're going to be inheriting, we know is not going to be easy. On the other hand, most of the world throughout most of time has lived in circumstances that were not ideal.
Yeah.
And they dealt with it or they didn't, but they developed strategies. And as you say, joy is one of them, creativity is one of them. If you look at how much art comes out of war, and art being visual arts and writing and poetry, that's one of the ways that we confront uncertainty and difficulty.
Yeah.
And I talk here a lot about hope being an action,
Yeah.
and that in some ways that I'm doing this because I need to in order to have hope. But I think what you're saying is joy is an action also. And
Absolutely.
that's what can save our true inner selves from disappearing into this miasma of uncertainty and death. Not to get too
But that's how you feel. That's your real reaction to this. And you're not alone in that sensation. But our ancestors and have chosen joy not because they were naive, but because they were stubborn.
right.
We're talking about a belief that the future, a different future, is still possible.
Right. And I'm Jewish also, so the whole concept of leave the world in better shape than you found it, repairing the world, but the idea that you are not expected to solve the whole problem, but also you can't not you are not to refrain from starting it at all.
Yeah.
So, so if we put in joy and creativity as part of those things that bring together a community, bring together a family, widen the tent of people that we consider our family. That's a much more enjoyable way to live than constantly being worried about the next action that's going to make us more miserable.
Yeah. I have taken the approach that I am not going to be angry at the lunatic in the White House being a lunatic because that's what he is supposed to do. I'm no longer surprised at the lunatic behavior. I am no longer angered by it in that same way. I've come to expect it. And it's a personal choice I'm trying to make. It's despicable, and I can't watch all of it because it's despicable. But I know what's happening, and I choose to take my energy and my efforts and my feelings towards the people in my life that I know I could have an impact on, and the communities that I know understand this feeling and this willingness to confront danger and confront evil in a way that is personal. When we talk about sharing our stories and building a community, it's built on these ideas of hope and joy and thriving. So we're building that infrastructure. And in large part, I'm a person of privilege. I grew up hearing white in a city like Los Angeles. I
Me
didn't
too.
experience, yeah, right. I didn't experience the oppression that communities of color have experienced in their own life here in this country. But I'm taken back to what I've studied from the Black experience in America after slavery and Jim Crow South and across the country. But these were communities that were under oppression, that suffered serious legal infrastructures that were designed to keep them down. And there are the civil rights movement and all the work that's been done to overcome that period. And it's still not done. The work will never be done, like we said. But those communities built themselves through joy and love. There is a conversation that takes place today that focuses on the idea of Black joy and Black and celebrate Blackness and success. All of that emanates from a place of love and power and identifying with oneself, how important how important those feelings are. And I'm not going to be the expert to speak upon the Black experience or Black joy, but I look at those things and I think that is a wonderful quality to have, to be able to carry and pull forth as inspiration. And I appreciate it for what it is. And I think it's a good lesson and a good model to say, yeah, we can overcome. I
Right.
think that's I think that's I think that's a song or a hymn song.
Yeah, right. It's not by mistake that it
No.
is there. So, as I think about this, it sounds great and it would be very helpful for my mental health. And thinking about the dude in the White House, an old therapist of mine said, he's a tree. What do trees do? Trees do what trees do. They exist to wave their leaves and just stand up with leaves going on and off of them throughout the seasons. And if we think of the people that we can't change, and chief among them is that dude in the White House, as something like a tree that has its own nature, that has everything about it that we have no influence over. But what we do have influence over is our reactions and our feelings and how do we live our lives. I would love to have a guide saying, "Here's how you bring joy back to your life."
Sure.
But I don't think it's necessarily as simple as that because let alone the political world, you have the whole, "How am I going to adult my way through the day?" kinds of
Sure.
issues, so
It, yeah, what we can't control, we won't be able to get our hands around. But for our day-to-day life, I think a lot of our modern day experiences that talk about self-care and that taking care of oneself, I think a lot of those tools are actually un they don't help as much as they hurt sometimes. When a person's self-care routine is to zone out with their phone or at the TV, you're not developing a level of self-care. That's the time when you're supposed to take in your whole day and
Mhm.
experience what you're going to experience. That's the time when you're supposed to find room for categorizing all your thoughts, to challenge your feelings. If you're having a bad day, if the world is oppressing you, definitely don't go to social media. It's going to be terrible. And I think that's part of a grave mistake we're making as a society in general. I mean, I take issue with how our representatives have handled managing and controlling social media and big tech in this country. It's changing in us something, right? It's changing in us how we spend our time, where we put our money, where we put our energy, our attention. We're here in the real world. And I think we're seeing a shift towards people finding more time alone, finding more time away. Social media has been prominent in my life since college. That's when it really got its start. So remembering that there was a period of life before that. We didn't just accept that social media was how we coordinated and communicated with each other.
And I'm older than you, so we didn't even have the web didn't exist when I was in college, and you had to go to a special lab to do email. So, those of you out there who are firmly ensconced in Gen X will remember all of these things. But one of the things that I heard and have taken in as one of the most useful things is that self-care is setting boundaries, right? It's not allowing somebody else to make you think or feel a certain way. It's
Mhm.
creating space for yourself to be able to be your full self and not have other people necessarily encroach on it. So I think we're saying the same things, although getting lost in social media is so compelling and is made to get those dopamine reactors going. And sometimes, even though it's really not a good idea, you find yourself doing it anyway. So,
Yeah.
the way I've been dealing with that is I've been obsessed with Wicked, listening to the soundtrack, watching all the explainers, watching the
so
movie
you,
a bunch of times.
so you found some joy. You found something to give you an experience that makes you feel better, that makes you feel happy. I mean, that's what we're all looking for, an escape. I mean, and this is going to share some money. I don't know Wicked. I haven't seen it. It's not my cup of tea.
Are you sure?
I'm
Because it's
so,
awesome.
it might be my cup of tea. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
But I also have watched a lot of Bluey lately. So that's been
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
on my list.
Yeah. Oh, no. I was there, and then your kid will not be able to remember it. This is the best. I gotta did was there's something I used to watch where they did blah, 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 and my kids' toddler and early elementary years are a total blur for me, but there was Blue's Clues at that time, Word World, whatever, and he doesn't even remember. So, just the
Insane.
human being is an interesting animal.
Quite fascinating. I feel like I'm relearning like sociology and semiotics just read through my child, like everything they experience and learn. I'm like, oh, right. That's how people function. That's what humans are. But kind of getting back to the topic, like we're in this very challenging moment where we have to learn, maybe relearn what boundaries are, what health is, what are the ways that we protect ourselves from the real harms that are out there without becoming numb to it and ignoring it. And I
Right.
think to me, that comes back to joy is going to a protest. Joy is taking part in action that will make my world a better place. Joy is going out into my community and finding people and shopping at more local places so that I know what that life is like. The more we're putting ourselves in a place where everything is faceless and just a transaction, we lose a sense of our self and our community and our identity, and we just make everything into a trade this, trade that culture. And that's a very macro idea. Like it's not easy to just transfer that. But the more the world is toxic online, find the room in your real world to find something that's really beautiful. And
Mhm.
when we think about this from the sense of like our storytellers and our leaders, like that's how we build community is through stories, through the idea that a future is not only possible, but inevitable when we come together in these ways, when we talk to each other and don't ignore these issues. We're so much, we have so much wealth in this country. And what we lack maybe is courage. That's where I'm at with this. And confronting people, confronting our own leadership on the notions that, like, you have taken half measures to help our society. You have settled for things that have not been good enough for us. I need you to go further. I need you to finish this job. And if you can't, I will, or this person will. Like, I saw that David Hogg was recently from his triple C, whatever his Democratic position, but he's using funds to support races where Democrats are waffling, weak, conservative, and he wants younger people, more progressive people in those places, challenging them in seats that are safe. And that's healthy. That's necessary because we're not moving in the direction we need to move. That's given.
Right.
But like
But
we need it.
yeah, our leaders are old.
Mhm.
They're half measures. I get so frustrated. Even those who know that they need to do more, I still feel are just talking. My representative is Catherine Clark, the Democratic whip. And,
Okay.
right, she talks a pretty good game. Have I seen her doing anything? Not really. Who is doing great is Jasmine Crockett and AOC. And how many people are listening? I mean, AOC and Bernie and are sort of blurring the line between culture and politics, and they're drawing great crowds. And that energy needs to be harnessed. But Jasmine Crockett has been speaking out the whole time. She gets treated like a Black woman. And she's making everybody else like everybody else needs to be putting their whole selves into this leadership thing the way that she is. And all the things that are wrong with this country are evident when we think about how many people listen to her or not.
Yeah, 100%. Jasmine Crockett's been very good, outspoken on these issues. She's got a talent for speaking and communicating and getting her values across. I think she'll only get better at it, and more people should listen. It's also important in times like this to recognize that great systemic changes in our society have seldom come from inside the government. They have come from outside pressure put on by people like us through active participation in society to affect those things. These aren't, we aren't being radical for the sake of disruption because the cost of delaying is a moral failure. And we're talking about, we're talking about giving ourselves real time to live, to exist, to thrive. And I think that that's gotten lost in a leadership that is, yeah, geriatric. and unable to understand the current needs of the day. We're over defending the crumbs of a broken system here. We've got to move past this.
I totally agree. It didn't work for most people. I mean, a small sliver got richer and made
Yeah.
their happiness out of wealth, but and to obviously, we cannot go back to that. It wasn't good enough. But I think one of the things that we need to do more of, and this is, I think, one of the ways that I've seen you come into it, is what do we imagine that future looks like? Pete Buttigieg, who I've been supporting forever, went on the podcast called Flagrant. And the way that he was able to share his vision, which is basically what we've been saying, in a way that they could hear it,
Yeah.
is astounding. And we need more of that, right?
Absolutely.
He went on, the first thing he said was something about White Lotus, right?
Yeah.
Immediately, he found some common ground based on
Sure.
popular culture.
Yeah.
And I don't think we do enough of that.
No, Pete Buttigieg has been singular in his ability to enter conservative spaces and speak plainly and get messages across. And I think there was this huge uproar after the election. Kamala should have gone on this podcast or that podcast, or we need our own Joe Rogan. I'm like, all of these are dumb, short-sighted understandings of reality. The reason that the reason that there is a conservative space in social media as it is that I think that there's a personality difference in how conservatives and progressives might feel and think. And conservatives don't really care as much about the perfection or the design of the thing. They're just trying to make the thing. Like they're not worried about how it's going to impact or how it's going to hit or who it's going to offend. So they just put it out there. And I think there's
Right.
a lot of, on the left, a lot of tampering of ideas, of jokes, of feelings to accommodate others. And there's room for that. It's necessary. You shouldn't be harmful or hateful. So you get these spaces, enter them freely. Talk
Right.
about things, believe in things, know that like where you stand is right and push back. Every time I see Pete Buttigieg talk to folks, he gets a head nod. He's getting things across. When people are fed one diet, they're going to only know that diet. You got to give them something else to understand, to believe in, and being absent from those spaces is the real sin. Not entering them because you judge them or feel they're wrong or don't because they don't match up with your own sense of idealism. That is how you lose ground.
Right. And we shouldn't forget that the conservatives have been doing this for 50 years. They've been
Oh, yeah.
funding it at
It's true.
far greater rates than we do. I mean, they fund the
It's true.
whole system. And I have plenty to say about how we do it and how creators or journalists are basically begging for being compensated for the work. And I totally agree. We need to be in those spaces because we do not share a reality right now.
It's true.
And we need a shared reality. And that's one of the things I talked to Tara McGowan about. She's the CEO of Courier Newsroom,
Yeah.
is how do you widen the aperture so that these conversations aren't just political conversations? They're encompassing popular culture. They're encompassing all the different pieces of our world where we can find common ground because most people don't want to be thinking about. I mean, we just spent half an hour talking about how people don't want to talk about politics. So we need to find a way to talk about our values some other way, right?
I think Bill Burr is a terrific example in modern culture. He's growing into a very, I don't think he predicted it, but like a George Carlin-esque figure right now. Just be saying the most obvious thing in the plainest way that makes sense to the Venn diagram of people that exist. There's legitimate anger and frustration in our society about what isn't working. And the story for how that's supposed to go or where we go next with it. That's what we're trying to connect with people. And so we're not going to talk about the wonky politics aspect of how we do healthcare in this country. We're going to talk about what it feels like for someone to leave their job because they don't have to worry about their healthcare because it's there. That's
Right.
entrepreneurship. That's the value we should find. Like, why are we talking about deductibles when what we're really talking about is, are you stuck in a dead end job? You should be able to leave and be an entrepreneur and go find your future. That's the American hero story.
Right.
But you can't do that because your healthcare is tied to your job. That's ridiculous.
It's
Now who's
totally
going to fix it?
ridiculous.
And who's going to fix it?
Right. But I'll take you one better. What if you didn't have to worry about your health care, but you also didn't have to worry about putting food on the table? I mean, how much creativity could blossom if
Right.
if you can leave your dead end job, you can leave an abusive relationship, you can really change your life if you didn't have to worry about putting food on the table and taking care of your kids and the healthcare. I mean, it expands the more you think about it.
Right. We're looking for the vision of a world where young parents are putting their kid down and they don't have to go and spend their time on the couch finding the next babysitter or the next nanny because that's figured out. They can spend that time having a glass of wine and making a photo album or just connecting with each other. We're talking about how
Or
do we
falling asleep
present a
because they can't.
future? Yeah, I'm a little bit, yeah, that's a little like high mind. Yeah, they could just sleep. Maybe they should just, but they want to have the wine and they want to make the photo album, but they just fall
Right.
asleep. But we're talking about imagining a future where people feel value in their time and that they're not just running. And I hate to put it in such like stark terms, but we're about to reach a pretty dark part of our country. Like there's about to be a real strong economic shift. The tariffs are impacting. People are losing money in the stock market. That's affecting seniors who might be retiring. And a group of people who expected to have money retiring, promised that their whole lives.
Right. Saved
and
for it their whole
they
lives.
saved for it, paid into a system. It's about to all get broken. That social contract is being broken, and we know who's breaking it. So not only are we able to present a story about the vision for our future that includes you and that includes your freedom and your well-being, we're going to be able to point to a villain that's on TV all the time, that talks absolute nonsense, and who is looking more and more out of touch with the average American, who doesn't understand that empty shelves mean less food for children, who doesn't understand the cost of milk. I mean, this is how much could one banana cost? $10? It's
Right.
like, where are we? That is how disconnected these people are going to look. Do look.
Right.
And that's the idea to paint. These are aloof, these are lost, ununderstanding billionaires without a care in the world for you. And they've lied. And we can tell that story quicker now with social media, with the internet. We can get to people faster. And as long as we hold on to the sense of confidence and strength in ourselves that we can move to that next place, we'll be able to tell those stories and move people in ways and talk to them in the places where they are, on their platforms, in their circles. But that takes resisting the urge to become insular.
We've got the vision. We've articulated it. Now we need to go make it so. And that'll be hard work. But I love diving into the joy. I can't believe I didn't say this until the end. I teach leadership courses that are all about being better humans, humaning better. Really, all relationships, all difficult conversations, all work kinds of things involve being human and bringing your whole human self. And politics is no different. We need to be humaning a little bit better.
I like humaning. I think we all just need it.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Over Fascism. Please subscribe at www.freedomoverfascism.us.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,